Hey everybody, welcome to another On the Couch with My Food Religion. Today I'm joined by the always awesome Kale Brock. And the first thing I like to ask everybody when they jump on with me is, what is something that you are digging at the moment? So it could be a food, it could be a book, it could be a piece of clothing. I don't know. What are you digging?
I'm actually a little bit somewhat obsessed with yoga at the moment, and I don't know when that happened. I did it a lot when I was living in California for 6 months. I did it every day, and then I stopped doing it for a couple of years, and then I've just gotten back into it. And I'm also doing some sauna work, so some hot sauna and then cold shower cycling, but not out of any sort of health hacking intention, just because it's fun.
Cool. And any particular type of yoga that you're into?
No, just a nice hot flow, and then I'm happy with the hot flow. I've even got my little yoga pants now. Got my little
Look at
tight
you.
yoga pants.
Soon you can start like hashtagging yoga on all of your Instagram posts. You could be a yoga influencer.
100%. I'm going to Bali. I'm
expecting.
I'm gonna be uploading photos of me posing in front of temples and monkeys. It's gonna be incredible.
In your yoga pants.
In my new 2XU yoga pants.
Oh, I can't wait to see that. Sounds amazing.
I don't know if it'd be that amazing. They're pretty tight.
I'm sure. Just give the people what they want. That sounds awesome. And are you infrared saunaing or just like regular saunaing?
I'd prefer to be infrared saunaing because I do believe that I actually do think it's a little bit healthier, but based on the research that I'm seeing, it doesn't seem to be a massive difference. I think it's more the temperature effects. So we're just in a regular sauna at the moment at the same gym that we go to yoga with, and we've turned it into a community event. So we have Sunday saunas where we all hang out, and we end up filling up this previously empty sauna with 6 or 7 friends and just chat and cycle between the cold showers and really encourage each other. And that's become quite an intentional practice, is trying to develop these rituals where I connect with my community a lot more. So yeah, if we can tie that together with a good health activity, then it tends to work pretty well.
As opposed to smashing shots at the pub.
Well, yeah, I don't think I've ever done that in my life because I was never that way inclined. But I'd say it's even more powerful than sitting in the corner alone sipping the green smoothie.
Yeah, absolutely. So could you please start by introducing yourself and just telling everybody a little bit about who you are and what's your jam?
Yeah, my name is Kale Brock. It's the name I was given when I was born. A lot of people like to ask whether that's something I adopted, but no, that's something I was given when I was born. I was born, pretty healthy out in the outback of South Australia, and then when I was 16, I was challenged with a health condition called supraventricular tachycardia, which is a heart condition, and I would experience intense arrhythmias, and I would be surfing or playing footy, AFL, and experience these intense arrhythmias to the point of almost fainting. And so I went to the cardiologist and got given an option to undergo a surgery to fix that problem. But I didn't want to go down that route. I was a vegetarian at the time. I looked across at the cardiologist and I thought, I'm gonna give this guy what for. So I said, well, what about nutrition? Has that got anything to do with it? And he said, nutrition's got nothing to do with it. And I think being, a little bit opposed to authority at that point, but also being slightly inclined to look into nutritional ideas, I went down a different route and ended up training with a naturopath in Adelaide for probably 8 or 9 years after that point. But in the next 6 to 12 months, she was able to teach me some pretty basic lifestyle principles, which still sit with me today. And I was able to reverse that condition and now manage it just using diet and lifestyle. So that was my entry point into health and wellbeing. And then I became a journalist for Surfing South Australia. Then I became a reporter for Network 10 for Totally Wild, the children's program. And then from there, that extended and I became freelance and started doing my own projects. And now here I am.
Awesome. So with your heart condition, you said that you were able to reverse it. What do you think was the main thing that moved the needle for you in terms of really making a difference there?
I still don't know. And it's funny, a lot of people have asked me that. They're like, oh, so what nutrient did you take? And That's the thing, and that's the mindset that I used to have. Is, it's one thing. What's the secret? But really, I think if we look broadly, we're looking at a recipe that tends to support health and well-being. And as Charlotte Gerson has said a lot, when the body heals, it heals. It doesn't heal selectively. So I think that when you give the body the right raw materials, it tends to know what to do. And I've seen that replicated. So I've had a couple of people who I worked with when I was health coaching, who had SVT as well. And they came to me and I said, look, I don't know what's working. We're not going to try and treat your SVT. We're just going to get you healthy. And as a side effect, they were able to actually reverse their SVT too and come off medication and have some pretty incredible health results. So I think when you give the body the right raw materials and then do some specific things, we did a couple of heart supportive herbs and stuff like that. Some pretty amazing things can happen. So yeah, I've always developed that. I've developed that respect for the human body over time, and I'm not that surprised these days when I hear some incredible stories about its healing potential.
Yeah. So what was some of the things in your recipe then that changed things for you?
I mean, I think you can look at things nutritionally. We always tend to look at things just nutritionally. And back then, that's what I did. That's probably the only pillar that I really addressed was nutrition, and then maybe potentially toxicity as well. For me, back then I was vegetarian, so I didn't know this, but I was eating a truckload of sugar and carbohydrates, because as soon as you take out those protein elements, it was like, what am I going to replace it with? So I was having like crunchy Wheat Bix or whatever, Wheat Bix Crunch for 2 or 3 times a day. I'm starving, I'm surfing a ton and coming home ravenous and eating apples, late at night. Not that that's a bad thing, but just over consuming food because I wasn't getting the right nutrition in. So what I ended up doing, and what I didn't know it was called a paleo approach back then, but I probably started off with a Paleolithic style approach. That was more moderate in nature, in that it was a lot more plants and quite Mediterranean style, a gluten-free Mediterranean style. And then I actually went full circle. So from there, I wasn't happy enough with the results, right? I thought, no, if a little bit is good, more must be better. So I went more extreme and ended up going raw vegan, lost a bunch of weight and felt good for a long time, but then just, lost too much muscle and ended up just sort of fading away and going, hey, this is not working for me. So I ended up adjusting from there and probably have landed back around to where I was, if not even in a more moderate space. So I think getting the nutrition right was good, just cutting down the carbohydrates. When I spoke with Paul Check about this in the States, when we acidify the body with too much sugar, the heart rate will naturally increase to realkalize the system through getting more oxygen in. So it will increase the respiratory rate as well. So if we can cut out the sugar and sort of balance that a lot better with whole food nutrition, so lots of vegetables, a little bit of animal protein, I think the body tends to fare a lot better. And I found that over the years, the only time I tend to have any little relapse episodes is when I've had a high sugar breakfast and then I couple that with intense exercise or intense cold, which tends to be a lot of the same reports from SVT sufferers, at least when they're connecting the dots. But so I just had to focus on those things initially. But going around the world now for the last film, I've sort of arrived, I think, at 4 main areas that I focus on and I think we'll talk about for the next couple of years. And that's sort of nutrition, of course, but also community, movement, and your attitude.
Yeah, absolutely. So can we talk a little bit about the first film that you did was The Gut Movie? So how did that come about, and what sort of made you want to dig more into the gut and poo?
Yeah, literally dug into poo for that film. So it was quite interesting. I had done a bunch of work in the health space at that time. I'd finished at Channel 10. I started doing workshops on fermented foods and gut health. And I thought, okay. So I eventually built a bit of a profile in that space and had done that interviewing the best experts in the world, because I wasn't one myself. I was always going to be the journalist, the storyteller. So I thought, okay, well, why not couple everything and tell this story? So we I called up a friend who ran a tour company in Africa, and I'd known that there was research being undertaken in Tanzania with native tribes there looking at their primal microbiomes. I thought, okay, I wonder if I can mimic that and do something similar. So we teed up a trip to visit the San people in Namibia, who are an ancient hunter-gatherer tribe there, previously nomadic, but these days more immobile. And I got to go and live with them for a week, and we looked at my microbiome before and after, and used that experience. And we looked at their microbiomes too, but we used that experience as a train upon which we allowed these incredible experts to narrate the microbiome journey. So we had people like Professor Thomas Barodi, who pioneered fecal microbial transplantations. We had Professor Mimi Tang, who's reversing peanut allergies using probiotic oral immunotherapy. We had John Ellerman, who's a microbiologist. We had Damien Christoph. We had Margie Smith, who's a molecular geneticist. You know, all these different incredible practitioners. We have Dr. Natasha Campbell McBride in the new international version of the film, talking about the GAPS diet. So then we got gut-brain connection, and we talked about antibiotics, and it was just, for me, it was a zoomed in look at what the gut does and how it impacts our everyday interactions. And this was in a time when it was early days when I got into gut, but I sort of rode that wave where it got super interesting, right? I mean, all the different prestigious universities around the world were coming out with studies going, hey, it's the microbes. And we started seeing mainstream attention on what was previously a more alternative topic. So it was a really good time to sort of capitalize on that and tell that story. And we could have gone, deeper, we could have gone broader. There was so many different options to do, but I think that's what led me to do the next film, was to zoom out a lot more. Whereas the microbiome story it's funny. Like, you think about it logistically, if you're going to go really deep into the microbiome, you've got to be prepared to have a lot of animations, and you've got a lot of caveats. So I spoke with Helen Patteran about this the other day, and I was like, it's hard explaining gut health, because you've got to say, oh, well, if this, then this. Oh, but if this, then this. So you open up cans of worms. So it's like, how do you navigate that experience for the listener, and honor people who are going to be coming from a blank slate, and honor people who will be coming from a place of almost expertise. People are so educated now. So it was a delicate situation, but I think we told a really interesting story, and I think the take home was that you are in control of the microbes that you have, and those microbes generally have a massive impact on the health outcomes that you experience every single day.
Absolutely. And I think what I loved about the film, though, was that it was super accessible. And like you said, for the general punter who doesn't really know anything about gut health and has been told by their GP that, don't worry about what you eat, doesn't make any difference. It was accessible to those people, but then people who love to geek out on the sciencey stuff like I do too, I thought that was really awesome as well. There was just enough of that in there for it to not be too overwhelming for people. And I think it was such a great message that, how you showed your N equals 1 experiment, that within a week, look at what changed. And that was super cool. And I think that was very, very powerful for people to realize that. I think sometimes people think about embarking on a health journey or changing their diet and nutrition, and they feel like it's going to be something that is going to take years to get back on top of. And in some instances, it is going to take that long, because it's been, 20 or 30 years of battering their body with shit. You've got to give yourself a bit of time to get back. But to be able to see that, you're a generally healthy person. So, to get those changes, though, within 10 days, I think is pretty awesome, isn't it?
Was within 5 days.
Yeah.
So it's super quick. Yeah. And Dr. Margie Smith was talking about that. You can change the microbiome within 48 hours. So that's an empowering notion, but it's also a constant reminder, because you can be healthy as much as you like, but then if you go off on this crazy tangent, your microbiome will shift very rapidly. So what that means is, rather than us trying to be 100% perfect for a certain amount of time, we're better off being 80 to 90% perfect for the rest of our life, because that's going to cultivate sustainable wellness. Whereas I think if we keep our focus on the short term, on the narrow, we're always going to sort of suffer as a result. And that's something that's been reaffirmed for me over time, is that we need to get out of this headspace where we just go, oh, okay, I'm going to go on a diet, I'm going to do the detox, I'm going to do this thing short term. We do need to think long term in terms of our microbiome, in terms of our lifestyle, in terms of our daily rituals and our approach to life. I mean, if we're not being sustainable, then we're always going to have a tricky time, because we're going to be bouncing up and down the entire ride, but we're much better off being steady.
Yeah, which I think is why it's such it just does my fucking head in. All of these like 8-week and 12-week challenges, and fucking just, it's summer now, so everyone's doing these ridiculous fucking juice cleanses or a detox, and you're just like, oh my God, like I get that an intervention is necessary for some people for some reasons, but the general punter who just wants to lose a couple of kilos because it's, they're going to have to throw a pair of swimmers on, firstly, give less fucks, because you've got a body, put some togs on, go to the beach, move on. But also, there's nothing sustainable about an 8-week challenge or a 12-week challenge or something like that is a diet. I don't care which way you cut it. I don't care how you call it. It's a diet, and diets don't work. We know that. We can look at any diet across the world, and it does not fucking work, because people restrict and then they binge, and their body's doing this whole yo-yo thing. And they get to the end of the 12 weeks, and then what do? Like, if you haven't created sustainable habits and a lifestyle that you can, for 80 or 90% of the time, cruise along with that being your normal, then what the fuck are you going to do? Like, you're just going to go back to whatever you were beforehand, probably plus a few kilos, because your body's freaked out. You just put it in some sort of weird starvation. It's not cool. Why are we doing this?
I don't know, and it's interesting. I appreciate those more extreme approaches sometimes as gateways. I mean, for me, it was a gateway, particularly going raw vegan. It was a great experience for me, because now I've got a reference point. Like, that's my one extreme over here. And then, I've never really done intense keto intentionally or anything like that. But, if we look at that as the other end of the spectrum, it's like, okay, where does good health exist for me? It's probably somewhere in the middle. So to explore those ranges is I think, a good thing. But it's very hard to solely exist at the end of the spectrum. If you can, kudos, and it works for you. But I think we honestly need to always be assessing the outcomes that we're getting and base our decisions off of that. If we're happy with the outcomes we're getting, by all means, continue doing what you're doing. But if you do need some adjustments, or you want some different outcomes, then you need to start behaving differently. And like you said, unless you can behave differently for 80 to 90% of the time, you're always going to revert back to where you were before. And that's the definition of insanity, to do the same thing but expect a different result. It would be really nice for people in the health industry to understand that. I've still got people who I know here in this community who are obsessed with either end of the diet. It's like, hi, I'm Ben and I'm vegan. Or it's like, hi, I'm Ben and I'm keto. It's like we wrap up our identities in what we eat, which is the strangest phenomenon ever. We're so much more than what we eat. We're the impact that we have on our community. We're the actions and decisions we make every single day. What you choose to eat is just a very small part of life's experience. So it's very interesting how it's gone that way. And I think, honestly, the reason we go to those extremes is because it's a shortcut for us to feel like we belong to a tribe and we have an identity, because we are in a bit of a crisis in terms of identity and tribe and community. We have loneliness now in epidemic proportions. And the research tends to suggest that it's worse for us than smoking, obesity, and substance abuse. So until we sort of, hey puppy, until we sort of appreciate that and start to develop surrogates and routines and habits that support those pillars of health and well-being, we're always going to feel like there's something missing. Whereas if we fill up those very human biological needs, I honestly think that once we get those base needs in place, it liberates us to start going, hey, what do I actually want to do with my time here on this planet? Because it's such a finite resource. I'm much better off going and contributing and trying to create something awesome than going around telling everyone how many kale smoothies I have. Yeah.
Oh, I feel like carnivore is the new keto. It's the new extreme.
It is.
It's wild, isn't it?
It's interesting. I mean, maybe, I don't know. It works for some people, and we've done extreme things to the human body. So when we've damaged people with antibiotics, when we've bombarded them with toxins and processed food for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years even, sometimes it takes an extreme approach to reverse that. So, you know, I don't know, but I don't know.
It seems like it has some excellent outcomes for really extreme health conditions. And I think for people who are suffering from those really extreme health conditions, you would just give anything a try at that point in time. But it seems extreme for the general punter who wants to, you know, just lose a bit of weight or do a bit of biohacking to kind of go carnivore. I just think, wow, that's a jump, isn't it? Like,
it's a big leap. It's a big leap.
It's a big leap. So can you tell me a bit about your new film?
Yeah. So the longevity film is sort of exploring all these, I think, timeless principles of health. I've always sort of been, even though we did the zoomed in version with the gut movie, I've always been more interested in the philosophical underpinnings of people who experience extreme health and well-being. So for me, I'm always interested less in the science and more in the results. So if there are people in the world out there who are getting incredible results with their longevity and well-being, I'm going to go and see them, not the scientist who's got a theory about, you know, human growth hormone or IGF-1. So we looked at the Blue Zone research, which was done by the Nat Geo guys and Dan Buettner over in the States, and they had identified 5 different regions in the world where people are living on average 5 to 10 years longer than us with drastically reduced disease burdens, you know, 97% of their life spent with great health and free of chronic disease, whereas over here we have 50% of all kids living with a chronic disease. So drastically different health results. So my experience in this film was to go to those different cultures. I went to 3 of the 5 just to follow a traditional sort of story act, a 3-act structure. I went to Okinawa in Japan, Loma Linda in California, and Ikaria in Greece to look at what these guys are doing and also compare my own lifestyle to it, because as much as I think I'm holistic, in a way, I'm also not really honouring the things that they were doing. And it was very much an exploratory approach for me, because I didn't know exactly what they were doing and I hadn't been applying it in my life. So I feel like this has been quite a transformational experience for me. As I think I said to you before we started recording, when we did the gut movie, the post-production process was so intense and I did not deal with it very well. I got sick and I was stressed and all that sort of stuff. Whereas this one, it's like all the same stimuli have been there, potentially problematic and overwhelming stimuli, but I've dealt with it so much better. And I think that's just my new mindset coming out of this film. And, you know, one of it is, quite tangibly speaking, is looking at obstacles now as opportunities to check back in and be present. Because if you look at these cultures, they're not just kicking back in hammocks, you know, sipping margaritas or sake bombs. They are busy people and they work hard and they've got problems and they were ravaged by World War II, you know. But they operate with such a deep present state awareness that was really inspiring. I hung out with Ilias in Ikaria, who's a farmer there. He's got 2 farms and he'll spend 8 or 10 hours a day in the hot Mediterranean sun on the farm working, but he'll do it at a pace that's more moderate and he's deeply present. He's got nowhere else to be, right? And then he'll go back and he'll cook at the restaurant all night for all the guests. You know, it was that sort of stuff that was inspiring for me, because if I was put in those situations, I go, oh man, I'm so over it, I'm so tired, I want to go do something else. It's like, well, hang on, if you like that now, you're going to be like that with everything, regardless if it's good, bad, or ugly. So that's been a big one for me, is just to shift that attitude around being in a rush. The Okinawans talk about us in the West as having hurry sickness. And I think we really do. I think rushing is a new disease. And we need to get out of that mindset. And sometimes I think it takes something drastic to do that. And that's what happened in the film. Whilst I was in Ikaria, I got a text from my dad saying that my grandpa, his dad, was diagnosed with a terminal condition, and he's since passed away. So that was quite a dramatic part of the story. You know, I'd been going and learning about longevity and how to live without disease, and this happens. You know, it really sort of hit home as to the drastic differences in how they're living their lives compared to how we're living ours, and the results that follow that. It's very, very different. So yeah, I don't know. And this is one thing, people are going, well, why aren't we changing? Why aren't we changing? We know this stuff. Why aren't we changing? And I think it's going to take something drastic. And I hope it doesn't have to get to that point. And that's sort of the whole idea behind the film and telling a powerful story, is that you try and incite change through that story. So yeah, we've got some incredible experts in the film, people who you would know and your fans would know as well. Dr. Mark Hyman, Paul Chek, Daniel Vitalis, Damien Christoph again, Nick Buettner, who was part of the original research team. Some really good people just to chat about these fundamental ideas of health and well-being and some of the more curious anomalies that were going on in these cultures too.
Awesome. I love Paul Chek, so I'm very excited about that. I have been a massive Paul Chek fan for such a long time. I think I've listened to every podcast he's ever done. And man, the man can fucking talk.
Wow.
So you listen to a podcast with him and he will ramble and go off on these tangents, like these random tangents, but he is the most fascinating man. I love him, so I'm very excited.
Did an interview. I think the interview went for like 4 hours.
Yeah, that does not surprise me one bit. He's such an interesting man. But I think why he I wouldn't call it rambling, because he knows his shit, but he does take such a holistic approach to life. So you might ask him a question about smoothies and next minute he's talking about your chi and like just these random things. You're like, dude, what? But he does, you know, he has just this incredible holistic focus, doesn't he, on all sorts of things in life. He's a super interesting bloke, so I'm very, very excited about that.
And very educated. I mean, you go into his house, and I went to Heaven House, which is their very famous big, place they've got in San Diego, out the back in the mountains there, and it's filled with books, and books of all different kinds on very left brain logical movement patterns, and then the flip side, like more esoteric religious ideas and philosophies. You know, he'll talk about God, he'll talk about Jesus Christ, he'll talk about Buddha, and then Allah, like all these different things, and he'll cross boundaries that no one else is willing to cross. But he also comes to it with the most open mind that I've ever seen of any health expert. And he talks about the power of rigidity. Paul's conversation very much was about getting children involved in health, which is very relevant to your experience, because previously in older generation, or maybe if we go back, it's probably more like 10,000 years ago in traditional hunter-gatherer tribes, it would often be the children and the grandparents who were left at the camp or at the place of residence, whilst the more fit and nimble people went out hunting and gathering. So there would be this constant cross-generational interaction between the young and the old would pass on wisdom to the young, and the young would pass on youth to the old. So he was talking about that importance and how there's also subsequent benefits to that interaction too, like movement for the oldies, because they have to get down, they have to engage with the kids, they engage with primal movement patterns when they do so. And then, of course, you get the very more logical things like the passing on of education. So he was talking about, if we want to actually get everybody healthy and not just old people healthy, when we talk about longevity, we're talking about not only adding years to your life, but also making sure your life now is of high quality. So he was talking, if we want to do that, we need to start with all generations. If we want healthy older people, we want healthy children. If we want healthy children, we want to have healthy older people as well. So yeah, that was pretty cool. He is one of the most fascinating and enjoyable people to meet with and chat with. And like, yeah, man, I think we're going to have to release some bonus clips on YouTube of his interview, because some of the stuff he says about God and dying and all these different things, it's so cool. I love it.
Yeah, he's a really cool bloke. On that, I find it really interesting. My mum and dad, my dad's 62 and my mum's 61, and they are fitter than most 30-year-olds I know. They're nuts, but they're into CrossFit, they're into yoga, they're into hiking, they're into meditation. Like, they're just into all of the things. But they look after Grace and my two nephews, who are 4 and 2, every Wednesday. And it's like, it's the highlight of their week. You try and take their Wednesday off them, lose their shit. No, rearrange your life, do it a different day. Wednesday's our day. But seriously, you see, like, they're very fit and healthy people, but it's like when the kids are there, they just have this sparkle. Like, Dad just can't, he's like, okay, so today we're going to go out scooting and we're going to climb trees and then we're going to go down and feed the turtles and then we're going to, like, just loves it. But it's so nice to see. It's so nice for the kids to have that relationship. And like you said, that learning and, getting that wisdom. Also having, solid, like, adult role models that aren't their parents. I think sometimes it's nice for kids to have those other adults of trust in their life as well. But it's so great for them to learn different things from different people as well. So it's just so amazing. So what other highlights came out of the film that made you, like, what other things have you changed in your life as a result of that film?
When I got back, I sold all my production equipment. So as a filmmaker, that's a pretty big deal.
Why did you do that?
It represented for me a big amount of unnecessary pressure in my life because, I had gone through this process. This is the second film that I've self-funded. Probably cost twice as much as the last film, over $150,000, just stupid amounts of money. And for me, it was like, okay, why am I doing that? Do I need to do that? And I think it was adding this unnecessary stress that I knew was impacting my health in a really negative way. When I got to California, I was the sickest I've ever been. And I was here making this film about people who don't get sick, and in order to do that, I was sacrificing my own health. So when I got back, I said, look, I don't want to do this the way I'm doing it anymore. So I sold all the equipment and moved house as well. We moved up a couple of suburbs into a village here on the northern beaches in Sydney where we can walk everywhere, because movement and daily movement and moderate movement throughout the day is a big, massive part of these cultures. They're not going to the gym for 60 minutes in the morning and then sitting for 10 hours a day like most Australians do. They're walking all day. They're bending down in the garden. They're picking up kids. They're fixing things on the house. They're walking up steep stairs in Ikaria and Okinawa. So that was a big thing for me. I wanted to walk everywhere. The other day I went to fill up my car and there were spider webs over the petrol cap, So I was like, I've won. Like, I've made it.
Yes.
This is it. It's like I've got
Mic drop, done.
So good, right? I've got my surf spots across the road. I've got more surf spots down there. I've got all my friends, some on this street here, plenty of them at the headland. We all meet up at the coffee shop, and it's very hard for me to walk down the street now without bumping into someone I know. And previously those experiences would have been fleeting and not empty, but just quick and unimportant, whereas now just approaching them with a lot more consciousness and being a lot more aware of the benefits of those, they become very rich experiences. So it's like, it's asking how people are and feeling that connection. I think now we've tried to use social media as this surrogate community piece of the puzzle. And we think that if we've got followers, if we've got people commenting on our posts, then that ticks off this community box, this community pillar. But it absolutely doesn't. All the research suggests that when we interact with someone in person, it is that nothing can beat that in terms of the benefits of community. When we look at someone in the eyes, or we even speak to them on the phone, it's so much more beneficial than receiving a text message, for example. And I think we've just so readily accepted social media as this surrogate community platform, but it doesn't offer the same benefits. And you know, we're talking about mental health. We're posting about mental health on social media when social media is probably the cause of most of our mental health problems anyway. I think the answer to these issues is, yes, to generate awareness, but more so to reach out into our community. So for me, not that I've had any serious mental health problems. You know, I think as part of any sort of creative industry, it's pretty rife to have emotionally disturbed problems. But for me, it's about creating those support networks and cultivating those relationships so that not only am I supported, but I'm supporting other people, because we know that when we feel like we're contributing to a tribe and we feel like we're needed, it tends to support our health and well-being. So that was something I learned a lot in Loma Linda in California, and that's the Seventh-day Adventist community. And these guys are living very similar to we are here in Australia. There's no geographical separation between Loma Linda and the rest of California, right? The neighbouring suburb has the highest murder rate capital in the country. And yet these guys are living 10 years longer than their Californian counterparts on average. Incredible numbers. So to see what they were doing, which was essentially coming together over a similar community mindedness, was incredible. And I got to volunteer there, and that was coming out of me being very sick. And it was like, you know, you go volunteering for a couple of hours, you feel amazing. So that was really cool. And then even going to a church service, which I'd never gone to before, not growing up religious or anything, just seeing the power of that shared fate of people feeling like they can really connect over something. Daniel Vitalis talked about this a lot. It's kind of just walking into a room and going, okay, we all agree where the universe came from and why we're here. Let's just go do the work. It really made sense to me. I saw the power in that. So, and then just even, you know, going skating with the young people in Loma Linda. It's like you see the power of community, and it's like, wow, I've never had this before. I've got friends, I've got close friends, but I've never felt like I've been part of this group sense of pride in sort of a geographical area. And so now it's like, it's very important for me to go surfing and see the same people out in the water and develop these. This is where I really think the power is to develop routines and healthy habits that we do regularly that help us engage with people in a healthy way. So for me, it's going to the 3 same cafes all the time. Every day I make sure I go out to a cafe for either a Medi mushroom latte or a coffee or a meal. And I go to the same 3 cafes because I want to go and connect with the same people over and over again and feel like I've got that tribe. And this is someone who's living away from my family. You know, my family in Adelaide, and that's been, you know, sometimes a big pressure on my relationship with Emma, my relationship with my family. You know, it's sometimes difficult. So we need to develop surrogates for those things where we identify holes in these pillars. I think we need to consciously cover them. And for me, it's been about, developing those habits that allow me to do that. I work from home. You know, this is me working. So often I don't get to connect with people, and I'll sometimes go a whole day without leaving the house and seeing someone, especially when I'm busy. So to hack that and shake it up a little bit was very necessary. And I think that's why it's been so easy, this post-production process, because it's just been fun. Like I've been connecting with people, chatting with people, and, you know, even arguing a point with my editor. You know, it's like it turns into a meaningful conversation. So yeah, I think we can really achieve these things if we just do them more consciously.
And so, where was your favorite place that you visited throughout that process? Where was the place that you were like, oh, these are my people?
Oh, I think it's a close call. I mean, California is interesting. You drive through the traffic in California, you're never going to feel that amazing. So California was a little bit stressful. But Okinawa was pretty special because it was my first taste of longevity culture, and it's very tropical. It's very Hawaiian-esque there, and there's waves, and some of the people surf, and the older people are just so sweet, and they've all got gardens. And I was dancing with the older ladies in Okinawa, and they were blushing and giving me hugs. Like it was incredibly cute. And to hang out with certain people there as well. We've got some really nice individuals in the film, like Yoshiko was this 94-year-old lady who we met that morning. She was singing karaoke in front of her Moai, which is a big social group. And she was dancing and singing karaoke. I'm like, who's that lady? Oh, she's 93 years old. It's like, okay. So I went and harvested some seaweed, brought the seaweed back, and she made us a seaweed salad for lunch. And then we went back with her to her karaoke group and got to sing karaoke again with her later that night. So it was like a fascinating, and she's 93 years old. So that was pretty cool. And then I also got to, I think in Ikaria, really experience the culture there in a big way, and that was through the Panagiri, and which was a religious sort of celebration there, and just hanging out with the people who live there and breathe it was a super special experience.